The invitation arrived on an ordinary afternoon, glowing on my phone screen with elegant gold borders and perfect fonts. Grand Retirement Gala in honor of Mr. Haroon. My father's name looked larger than life, as if the screen itself bowed to it. Beneath the formality and celebration, however, there pulsed an emptiness I knew too well, the emptiness of years where I had existed on the edges of his world, unimportant and unintroduced. A second message followed. No decoration, no warmth, no reason. Do not attend. 3 words, simple. Sharp, final. I read them again and again, as if repetition could soften the blow. It didn't. My chest tightened, not with rage at first, but with the old familiar ache of a child asking silently, "Why am I never enough for you?" My father had always chosen status over sincerity, guests over family, applause over affection. I was the chapter he never finished reading, the story he didn't want to include in his presentable life. I typed back 1 word, "Why?" There was no reply, just silence, thick and confident, as if he knew silence would hurt more than any explanation. But I wasn't a child anymore. I had spent years building myself out of absence, learning how to survive without his guidance, how to stand without his support. While he performed success under chandeliers, I wrestled with numbers, meetings, contracts, and decisions that rebuilt the company he claimed full credit for. I had become stronger than he ever imagined, and far calmer than he expected. What he didn't realize was this: the empire he loved to boast about no longer legally belonged to him. Quietly, without speeches or dramatic announcements, the ownership had shifted, the board had signed, the papers had been stamped, and the name written on them was mine. So when he said "do not attend," something inside me stopped breaking and started clearing. I didn't feel the urge to argue or cry. I didn't want to arrive as the unwanted son begging for a place. I wanted to arrive as the person I truly was, the one he never thought I would become, not to humiliate him, not to prove anything, just to be present. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't shouting or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it is a calm decision, a steady heartbeat, and the quiet power of walking into a room where you were told you didn't belong. And so I decided I would attend. The hall glittered like a kingdom built from light. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden rain onto polished marble floors, and music floated through the air like something rehearsed to perfection. Guests arrived in smooth waves, each one wrapped in perfume, expensive fabric, and carefully practiced smiles. It was the kind of place where image mattered more than truth, and reputation walked taller than relationships. I entered quietly, unnoticed at first, like a shadow slipping through brightness. Everywhere I looked, I saw my father. Not it began without drama, without raised voices, without music stopping the way it does in movies. It began with footsteps. I was seated near the back of the hall, hidden behind a tall vase of white lilies, when 2 security guards started walking toward me. Their movements were purposeful, not aggressive, just certain, like people following a map. Conversations around me faded into a cautious hush. Curious eyes followed them, expecting scandal, expecting removal, expecting me to finally be sent away. The taller guard stopped in front of me. His expression shifted from firm to respectful in a matter of seconds. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "Are you a Dan Haroon?" I stood slowly and nodded. Something changed in the air. His posture straightened, his tone softened. "My apologies, sir," he continued, just loud enough for half the hall to hear. "We were informed that the owner had arrived and was not being properly escorted." The word landed like a dropped glass. "Owner," it echoed through the hall, bouncing from table to table, sliding into every whisper, heads turned. People froze mid-smile. The same relatives who had told me you shouldn't be here now stared as if reality had tilted sideways. Even the waiters paused. On the stage my father turned. The spotlight that loved him so much suddenly felt too bright. For a brief moment his mask slipped, not completely, but enough to reveal confusion, shock, and something else he rarely allowed anyone to see: fear. Someone near the front repeated it in disbelief. "Owner," the head of security spoke again, clearly this time, as if giving an official announcement. Yes, legal owner of the corporation. We have verified his credentials and ownership documents. Full protocol is required. People who had ignored me now stood. People who had looked through me now tried to meet my eyes. 1,000 tiny social calculations began happening all at once. I didn't move quickly. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply stood there, calm, steady, no longer small. My father stepped down from the stage, his voice trembling as microphones caught every unsteady breath. "This must be some mistake." "It isn't," I said quietly. My voice didn't need to be loud. Silence carried it for me. "You transferred ownership months ago. You signed the papers. I just didn't disappear the way you expected." Those words weren't sharp. They were simply true, and truth, spoken gently, can be the loudest sound in a room. For the first time in my life, my father didn't look above me. He looked at me. The night did not explode after that moment. There were no arguments thrown across tables, no shattered glasses, no dramatic collapse of pride. Instead, everything became strangely quiet. It was as if the party itself had paused to breathe, realizing the story was different from the one it had rehearsed. People began rearranging their expressions. Those who once brushed past me now smiled too quickly. Those who had avoided my eyes tried desperately to meet them. Every conversation shifted direction like a river discovering a new path. I could feel it, the instant change in how I was measured. Not as the unwanted son, not as the forgotten chapter, but as something they suddenly needed to respect. I didn't move toward them. I didn't need to. My father stood a few steps away, surrounded by lights that suddenly felt harsh instead of celebratory. Without the applause, without the microphone, without the crowd cheering his name, he simply looked like a man who had finally reached the edge of his choices. He approached me slowly. Up close, he no longer looked like the legend in photographs. He looked human, tired, stunned, and maybe, beneath all of it, regretful. "You really own it?" he asked, as if saying the words cost him something. "Yes," I answered. My voice was calm, steady, the kind of calm you earn after years of storms. "Legally, completely." He swallowed, searching for anger inside me and finding none. That seemed to unsettle him more than anything else. "I never meant for things to become like this," he said softly. Neither of us pretended that sentence fixed everything. It didn't erase birthdays missed or silences sent instead of love. It didn't return the years where I stood in the background, listening to my own name spoken like an inconvenience. But it was the closest he had ever come to admitting anything. "I know," I replied, and I did. He had not acted out of hatred, only out of pride, ego, fear of imperfection. Those things can wound just as deeply. I realized then that revenge wasn't about watching him break. It was about knowing I no longer needed his approval to stand. I walked toward the terrace, leaving behind the echo of music and murmurs. Outside, the city stretched beneath the night sky, lights blinking like quiet promises. The cool air wrapped around me, gentle and freeing. For the first time in years, my heart didn't feel heavy. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't humiliated anyone. I hadn't burned anything down. I had simply arrived as myself, and that was enough. As I exited the hall, security opened the door with respectful certainty. "Have a good night, sir," they said. I stepped forward, carrying no anger, only peace, the sweetest revenge of all.